How reliable are the United States Centers for Disease Control's death numbers? October 2020. This is a graphic from the Centers for Disease Control's FluView website, which purports to report the percentage of deaths each week attributed to pneumonia and influenza, which it implies are largely caused by the influenza virus. The scary red line that you see here is apparently the percentage of all deaths due to pneumonia and influenza. You can see it's very seasonally, getting worse during the winter. It is typically at least 6% and sometimes goes up quite high. For example, in 2017, over 10%. You can see that the average is well over 6% every year. And these are numbers which the CDC has put out for many years, long before the current crisis, under non-crisis conditions where it's easy to spend time and make sure the numbers are correct. This looks pretty straightforward. Between 6 and perhaps as much as 10% of people each year must be dying from pneumonia and influenza. However, this is the Centers for Disease Control's leading causes of death report. And this lists influenza and pneumonia as the 8th leading cause of death, with the following percents. In 2017, 2% of people died from pneumonia and influenza, according to the leading causes of death. In 2016, again, percent of total deaths is 1.9%. Less than a third of the scary red line, less than a third of what the FluView website shows. The leading causes of death report explicitly gives the number of people who supposedly died from pneumonia and influenza in 2017 as 55,672. The red line in the FluView graph is supposedly produced from files produced by the National Center for Health Statistics, raw data files available on the FluView website. Adding up the death numbers in those files gives about 188,000 deaths from pneumonia and influenza in 2017. The pneumonia and influenza annual death numbers differ by a factor of over 3, and this is the case not just in 2017, but for earlier years and other years. It's not a one-year aberration. What gives? It turns out there's a long history of serious, heavy criticism of the Centers for Disease Control's flu death numbers. The most prominent critic is Peter Doshi, who is now a professor at the University of Maryland. This is an article he wrote in the British Medical Journal in 2005, Are U.S. Flu Death Figures More PR Than Science? This is his thesis at MIT, Influenza, Study in Contemporary Medical Politics, which contains numerous very serious criticisms of the numbers put out on the CDC website and in their official documents on deaths from influenza and pneumonia. This is a more recent article in the British Medical Journal, Influenza, Marketing Vaccine by Marketing Diseases. Peter Doshi is the most prominent critic, but there are a number of other medical doctors and scientists who strongly criticized these numbers and noted a variety of seeming discrepancies, contradictions, and difficult to understand claims. What gives again? How can we get two numbers that differ by over a factor of 3? I don't know. After close examination of the documentation on the website and in the documents, this is what I think is going on. The leading causes of death, this is the smaller number, the 55,000, the 2% per year. These reports in the fine print use the language, the underlying cause of death. I'll quote, in this report, tabulations of cause of death statistics are based solely on the underlying cause of death. The underlying cause is defined by the World Health Organization as, quote, the disease or injury which initiated the train of morbid events leading directly to death, or the circumstances of the accident or violence which produced the fatal injury. Death certificates often list multiple causes of death, and the selection of an underlying cause of death being one of those may be relatively arbitrary. In contrast, the FluView website uses the language a cause of death. And again, I'll quote from the documentation. the National Centers for Health Statistics surveillance data are used to calculate the percent of all deaths occurring in a given week that had pneumonia and or influenza listed as a cause of death. Thus, many of the counted cases in FluView, the underlying cause of death presumably was not pneumonia or influenza, something else. At this point, it's probably important to understand the concept of an opportunistic infection versus what I choose to call inherently deadly infections. An opportunistic infection is an infection caused by pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, or protozoa, that take advantage of an opportunity not normally available, such as a host with a weakened immune system, a cause of death, not the underlying cause of death, which would be, for example, whatever weakens or destroys the immune system. A well-known example of an opportunistic infection is Pneumocystis pneumonia, a common fungus. It's all over the place. Most of us have been exposed to it. Most of us are immune to it. Many of us actually have it living in our lungs harmlessly. When the immune system becomes weakened, however, due to chemotherapy, due to AIDS, due to cancer, the aging process, it can kill us. And it's probably responsible for some fraction of those pneumonia and influenza deaths. It seems probable that it's simply a common cold that we got over when we were young and became immune to. In contrast, an inherently deadly infection, which is my terminology, is an infection caused by pathogens that can easily kill otherwise healthy adults, including young people with a healthy immune system, the underlying cause of death. Remarkably, it's not clear that such diseases exist in the modern world in advanced industrial nations. A probable example historically is the Spanish influenza in 1918, which reportedly killed large numbers of young, reportedly healthy people in their 20s and 30s. Most modern-day pneumonia and influenza deaths appear to be opportunistic infections in unhealthy, usually elderly people. These have been included, apparently, in the FluView statistics to make this scary red line the larger numbers of 6 to 10% of deaths per week, per year actually, due to pneumonia and influenza. The likely purpose of this is to generate fear to get people to purchase the flu shot, the flu vaccine, which was a $1.6 billion business in 2015, is undoubtedly larger today. The problem with this is the influenza vaccine seems unlikely to work in these cases, opportunistic infections, because these patients have a weakened immune system. Most of us have natural immunity to Pneumocystis fungi, yet we could die from it if we weaken. In fact, natural immunity is usually considered to be stronger than the immunity conferred by most vaccines, which often use a weakened or damaged version of the virus to produce the immunity. Consequently, these vaccines and the vaccine-induced immunity is likely to fail in people who suffer opportunistic infections. In fact, there has been significant research over the years that the flu shots don't do very much for the elderly or the very young who have weakened immune systems. This is subject of some controversy. There have more generally been various studies, like by the Cochrane collaboration, that indicate the flu shots in general aren't very effective. Probably many people listening to this will know of people who got the flu shot and promptly got sick. I've had people tell me that a number of times in the last few years. Granted, many things we think of as the flu are actually not the influenza virus, therefore that's a way to get around that. The bottom line, though, is, again, these opportunistic infection cases are not going to help, in general, are not going to be helped by a vaccine. Nonetheless, they appear to be included in the FluView graphic, which likely has a marketing purpose. And this has been one of the main criticisms by Peter Doshi and others, that these numbers are being massaged, that would be generous, to market the flu vaccine. In conclusion, The Centers for Disease Control's death counts can have large uncertainties. Presumably, other numbers that are coming out from them should be taken with similar cautions based on what we can see in the pneumonia and influenza numbers historically before the current crisis, when the numbers were produced in a non-crisis, non-panic environment, and should in fact be very accurate. Our previous videos and articles on the contradictory numbers on the CDC website have repeatedly been censored by a range of social media services, such as LinkedIn here. This was a few weeks ago. This is the actual post that was censored. We've run into this with a number of different platforms. It's rather concerning, especially considering that these posts are pointing out contradictory data on the official CDC websites and documents. Apparently, it is a real threat to the society, democracy, human lives to point out obvious, gross discrepancies on government websites. You can bypass this censorship with our censored search website and service, which you can reach at censored-search.net or censored-search.com or censored-search.org. We may add additional names later, but those are the names right now. It's censored-search. Find the answers to your problems censored by advertisers and other powerful interests. It is free. We have a free version, which ranks the search results according to popularity. That is how many other websites link to the page, the search result. You can also pay and get more control and transparency into the algorithms. You can get access to more advanced artificial intelligence algorithms that look through the censored content and try to identify pages that are censored because they contain factual, true information, and separate those out from other ones which are not so useful. A popularity contest cannot always do that correctly, and popularity contests can be manipulated in various ways. Thus, check out censoredsearch.com, censored-search.net, censored-search.org. This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising-beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.